Hello and welcome. My name is Darryl Keeley and I'm your host. I'm here with Clare Evans, the UK's leading time manager. Clare Evans is a time management and leadership development coach, and she is the author of the best-selling book, Time Management for Dummies. Welcome, Clare.
Hello. Hi. Thanks, Darryl.
Could you tell our audience a bit about yourself and about your business?
Well, I am, as you said, a time management coach, and I work primarily both one-to-one and with groups of people, and a lot of that time over the phone, just helping them sort out and organise their time management and productivity issues. So all those people that sort of say, oh, I don't have time for that, or there aren't enough hours in the day, all those sorts of little, there's never enough time to get everything done, that's where I can step in and help guide them through what they need to be focusing on and what they need to do.
Wow, I can imagine that would be a massive audience.
Yeah, everyone does tend to say, oh, I need some of that. But, yeah, it's actually taking that next step, which is the important one.
And when you talk about the next step and coming in and take this training with you, do you find that some people have an idea that they think they're really good at time management, or they're pretty certain that they're not before they come to see you?
It varies. I mean, some people are actually pretty good at time management but know that they can improve, or particularly these days I work with a lot of people that either run their own businesses or are sort of at the sort of director manager level, and they're just incredibly busy just trying to sort of keep the business going or sort of keep their head above water and just want ways of doing things differently. As much as those people that come to me and sort of say, my time management is appalling, I'm always late for meetings, I'm always missing deadlines, I'm sort of really disorganised, which is really nice and meaty to work with because there's a lot of scope. And other people just need a different perspective, new way of doing things, pick up a few sort of tips, ideas, and it's just taking that time out to think about what you can do differently or actually what's really important. And that's where it can really help.
And you've earned the accolade of UK's leading time manager. How do you earn something like that? How do people know that or measure it, I guess?
Well, I guess that's sort of something other people have applied to me more than I've sort of applied to myself, in that when people think of time management, and I guess because the book is out, there are other time management coaches that I met early on in my coaching career who've also published books. But having the Dummies book is a very good one, and I do tend to be a point of contact for people that are looking that up, particularly journalists. It seems it's quite useful for that.
Good. Now, I understand you've got something you'd like to share with us today to help us listeners to improve our time management as well. And I'm certainly got my ears pinned as well, ready to hear what you've got to share, because I'm sure I can learn a lot as well. So can you share with us what you've got?
I certainly will. What I'd like to sort of just go through in this session is just a few of my key points that I like to highlight with people. Obviously, we've got a limited amount of time and there's sort of only so much I can go through, but just a few key strategies that people listening into this will be able to take away and put into action from this, a few things they can apply to what they do now. And they're what I call my essential time management strategies. So, and it's also about improving your productivity, so that's where I'd like to focus. So, quick bit, Darryl's already mentioned sort of who I am. I do work with individuals as well as groups and businesses, and my contact details are there if anyone would like to get in touch afterwards or has their own questions. So, thinking about where you are now, this is the sort of scenario that some people might come to me with, sort of the completely chaotic desk, you can't find anything, and that can also be their state of mind as well, as much as anything else. Everything is up there, it's all very cluttered and disorganised and not knowing what's happening. So that's the first point when you're looking at anything that you want to change is, okay, where am I now? What is it that I would like to change? What do I need to do differently? And to be able to then put that into context, to think about what needs to change, how you're going to change things, and what you actually want to do and what's important. So there's a time audit which I go through with people, which is a really useful starting point, because that gives them an idea of where they need to change things, where they are now. And thinking about what your time challenges might be. So if you're wasting time, that's a classic one. People often sort of feel they're wasting an awful lot of time in their day. They're not being particularly productive. That's sort of classic. You come into the office 9 o'clock, you leave at 5 if you're lucky these days. A lot of people tend to work much longer hours than that. And you get to the end of the day and you think, what have I actually achieved today? It's that sort of not being particularly productive and also not working very efficiently. We might be there from 9 to 5, but how much are we actually getting done? What are we actually achieving? What does your to-do list look like? How many things do you get ticked off in a day? Things like that are sort of commonplace symptoms of the things that you can change. Also, obviously, working late and at weekends, that's something that I see and I hear about an awful lot. I don't know what it's like there with you, but certainly in the UK, we are supposedly, in various stats that you see, we work some of the longest hours of the various countries in Europe. And I frequently speak to people that are working sort of 50, 60, 70. I even had one client that was working 100 hours a week. It's like, how do you have time to do anything? She wasn't running two businesses at the time, so she was running her own business in the evening. But it's that classic working late, not leaving the office till 7, 8, 9 o'clock, having to work at weekends to either catch up on things or to do something
like that. When you have people working those massive hours, is there a long-term effect that you see as symptomatic of bad time management?
There is, yeah. I mean, and I think the key thing with that is around the health issues. One of the classics is you don't have time to exercise and you don't get enough sleep because you're essentially burning the candle at both ends. And also it can be incredibly stressful. The number of people that end up taking long-term sickness either for specific health-related issues or for stress-related issues. And stress is something that builds up very, very gradually. And if you're constantly being overloaded with work and you're feeling that stress, or you're constantly working to deadlines, some people can take different levels of stress. Some people can take more and they can deal with that quite happily, but other people can't. And also it has an impact on your career and how you can progress and how you're perhaps perceived by other people as well.
Very true. All right, thank you.
So that's sort of identifying what your specific time challenges are to start with is stage one. And stage two is thinking, okay, what do you want? What is it that you want to change? Whether you would like to have more time. As I said, if you're working long hours, then you're likely to be not seeing your friends and family as much, not spending as much time with your partner, or you both come in exhausted and collapse at the end of the day and then go to bed, and it's the same routine night after night, and then weekends you're just trying to catch up. Less stress, so I said, if you're working particularly long hours or you've got an awful lot of work to get through, then the stress is going to build up. So if you're feeling stressed, you might think, well, I just want to feel more relaxed and appreciate the holiday when I have the holiday. Reducing your working hours, that's obviously a key thing that a lot of people want to do. They realise that they're working very long hours, weekends and late, and they just think, I just want to get back down to a 9 to 5 and feel I can leave to work in the office when I've finished at the end of the day.
What a luxury.
And taking time out, actually, it's amazing the number of people that I talk to or I hear from who are so busy they don't have time to take a holiday, and they don't even have time to take breaks, even over the weekend. And it is so important that we give ourselves that time to switch off, even if it's just during the day. We need to switch off as much as we need to be able to sort of take holidays and vacations on a regular basis. The other thing that a lot of people will find these days is the distractions and interruptions that just come with day-to-day life. We're constantly bombarded, not only with sort of things like email, but smartphones. Technology just follows us everywhere, as well as a lot of people feel the need to have it following them everywhere and switched on at all times. And that can be a huge distraction, as well as the other distractions that we get just in the working environment day to day. And that can have a huge impact on our time, productivity and efficiency. And in various sort of stats that are out there, that if you get interrupted throughout your day, you're likely to get interrupted every 10 to 12 minutes. And whether it's internally or externally, and internal distractions are where you're distracting yourself for various reasons. And that obviously builds up. If you get distracted that number of times in an hour, then every time you need to go back to what you were doing, and it easily adds up to at least an hour a day, if not two. So 1 to 2 hours a day you're spending on being distracted. And it obviously means you get a lot less work done. So thinking about ways of, I'm constantly being distracted in my working environment, or even in the home environment, or the type of office, or colleagues, etc. Something else that people often want is to have a better income so they can have a better lifestyle. They can do more when they're outside of work, is usually the way that works. And that might be something you want to look to. If you're more organised, if you're more productive, then perhaps you can improve your career as well. Or if you're running your own business, then you can increase the amount of income that's coming into your business by focusing on what's important. And ultimately, what most people want is a better balance in life. A lot of people are spending more time at work than they are actually outside of it, or they're so stressed out that they need that sort of relaxation time at the weekends and time to try and switch off. So better balance. And that's what I want to really help people with, that it's not all about work. And I think particularly when you're starting out in a new job, you have great ideas about what you want and how things are going to be. But, I've seen it, and it happened when I was working in sort of the corporate world. It quite quickly you get sucked into the longer hours, or the sort of the increased demands, and then you find your working hours are extending, and you're getting calls sort of after you finished work of things that need to be fixed. And the balance just goes out the window. And as part of that, you're missing out on sort of time with friends and family, and your social life, and all the other things that are important to us.
Well, certainly a big dilemma for, I think, not just people who own businesses, but people who are in management circles, but also people who are on the front line. From what I see, you talk about the distraction. That's an amazing stat, and it's quite accurate too. 10 to 12 minutes per distraction. Some people talk about taking 10 minutes to actually reframe back to what they were doing before the distraction.
Yeah, well, I've seen something recently that said it takes 20 minutes for your brain to switch. But I think by that time you could have got a whole task done.
Yeah, or two more distractions.
It is. Yeah. And I think people don't realise it when you're actually going through it. And it does very much depend on the task that you're working on and the type of distraction. But if you're very focused on something, and a lot of what I talk about, it is about focus, and it quite simply and quite easily can come down to something as simple as focus if you want to improve things. But if you're working on one thing and then somebody even when I was in my little sort of cubicle world, people would come up and sort of say, have you got a minute? So they've already interrupted you and you've been distracted. You then have to decide whether you have or you haven't. And I think we all know full well that when somebody says, have you got a minute, it's never a minute. It's 5 minutes, it's 10 minutes. And at the end of that conversation, whatever it might be, you've then come out with something that you potentially need to do, so that's added to your workload. So it's being able to deal with things like that to reduce those distractions in the first place.
Wow, yeah. That's a good point.
And I think particularly with technology these days, and I'll come on to a few of the sort of the key areas and points in a bit that we need to learn to deal with.
Good. Wow.
So, you really need to use your time wisely if you want to use it productively and effectively. And one of the things that I like to do with people is to make them think about what their time is actually worth. If you don't value your time, then you're not going to appreciate how and where you spend it and the choices you make with it. And equally, other people aren't going to value it either. So, and this can apply whether you're employed or whether you're working for yourself and therefore you earn your own income. But it's good to understand what your time is worth and effectively what your hourly rate is. And you can work that out by your level of income, the number of hours that you work, and the number of sort of working days in the year. And I know within the UK it works out at the minimum level of a salary, average salary here of 25,000 sterling. I'm quite sure what that equates to in Australian or US. It's about double or treble that, I think, depending on the exchange rate. But it works out at £15 an hour.
Well, in Australia, the average wage is around 70,000, and there are around 2,040 hours in a year, working hours. So I guess what you're saying is to divide 70,000 by 2,040 to figure out what the base rate is. And then apply that. I guess you've got to make profit as well, so you times that by a factor.
Well, if you're paid as an employee, so if you're earning a salary, then you work it out on effectively what you earn and the number of hours that you put in. But then what you also tend to find is a lot of people will work additional hours that they're not actually being paid for. So you might not get paid overtime. You might do, especially if you're working late. And again, I see that particularly, depending on what level you're at or the type of business that you're in. A lot of people these days don't get paid overtime, but they're still working a lot longer than their contracted hours. So that's reducing your hourly rate down, but you're actually being paid. So understanding that can then help you to think about how you're using your time. And as I said, what the financial impact of that is. If you're, and I'm guessing, that amount Aussie dollars would be, say...
I think that's $33 an hour, I think.
Yeah, maybe sort of a little bit more than that. So if you think about, okay, every hour that I'm wasting, that effectively is what it's costing me or it's costing the business. And if you can find someone that can actually do what you're doing in that hour for less, then it makes sense to pay them or outsource them to do it. And in a business environment, there are all sorts of activities that a lot of people will take on that somebody else can actually do quicker and more easily than them in your own life.
Do you find people get kind of challenged by that outsourcing, if you like, because it takes away their core busyness? And they've got to produce a more valued offering, like if they're an owner of a business and they're doing busy work and they outsource that busy work, that means they're left with a smaller percentage of high-value work that they'll have to increase.
Exactly. It gives them more time to focus on it. And you don't outsource, and again, you need to be organised, and I've worked through with people in this aspect as well, of just working through what they're doing, and as soon as they start to see where their time goes, they sort of think, well, as a business owner, do I really need to be doing the filing? Do I really need to be answering the phones or doing my books or the accounts or sending out the invoices? And no, they don't. That's not core to their business. What's really core to their business is what only they can do. And that might be going out and talking to customers, clients, products or services. So what's really, really important that they need to focus on their time on. So, for instance, if they're charging $100, $200 an hour, should they really be spending their time on something that they can get somebody else to do for $20, $30, $40 an hour? So that's where it's useful to understand this. But even in if you're employed, if you're working for another company, is thinking about what you're actually paid to do. What's your job role? What's your focus and your responsibility? And are you actually taking on a lot of things that aren't your responsibility? Which people do all the time, because we want to be able to do lots of different things. We perhaps want the variety. We want to be seen to be helpful, but it's impacting how productive and efficiently we're working.
Very true. We do see a lot of companies in the recruitment area that are small businesses that the owner is literally treating their time as how do I say, unlimited. They don't factor in their own cost to their own time. But so when they try to outsource to somebody else, they actually see a dollar figure for the first time, if you like, and they're confronted by that charge. And whether it's outsourcing to someone who's at a lower rate to themselves, or outsourcing to a professional who can do it at a better quality and perhaps more efficiently as well.
And it can be a difficult conversation for them to have or to think about. But once they understand the benefit that it would then bring to the business by either recruiting additional staff, which I've worked with somebody who, when I first started working with him as a business, it was just him. And he occasionally had, I think, a marketing person that helped him and an admin person. Now, 2 years later, he's got a team of 10 who are helping him out. And he's been able to free up his time to do the things that he really needs to do and the things that only he can do, and do that in a much more effective way. And there's a real mindset that needs to sort of change at that point of, at what point am I actually going to make more money or increase the sort of productivity of the business as a whole by actually either recruiting or outsourcing.
How have you seen with the GFC that in the recent years and people's uncertainty about the marketplace, have you found that people are a bit more nervous hiring staff in the UK as permanent staff?
I would say yes and no. And again, I'm working with somebody at the moment who's taking on additional staff. But equally, I've also talked to people who have needed to let people go, which again is very difficult when you're in a company to actually let people go. But the great thing that is out there at the moment, which we didn't have a few decades ago, is the virtual market and the increased number of freelancers and contractors that you can take somebody on to do the work, but they're not necessarily employed. They're a virtual resource, and you can contract for the number of hours that you need. So as a small business, you might only need an hour or two's bookkeeping a week, or maybe even a month. So you don't have to have a full-time bookkeeper. And equally with admin type resources and other things. So there are ways, but you do need to look at the business side of, is it more cost effective for me to employ an additional staff member? Because yes, there's the overhead, but it means I can then increase the business. It gives them more time to go out and spend time with their clients.
Certainly. And that's how the recruitment business is going nowadays too. It's interesting to note that we used to be predominantly, we don't get paid unless there's a placement, and it's usually a hefty bill for the poor client that's on that model, because they're having to absorb risk. And now the recruitment industry is turning to an outsourced model where you essentially outsource the recruitment process to an experienced recruiter at a set hourly rate. And it's a lot lower fee in the end for the client, but also a lot safer for the recruiter as well.
Yeah, so there you go, hourly rate. So when you understand your hourly rate, you can put it into those sorts of terms. And a good point you made there is about the business owner doesn't always, they don't count their time. And when you end up going through an analysis of how much time they put into their business, what they're actually earning, an awful lot of people end up earning less than the minimum wage, and you think, well, why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense. So that's why that particular slide is it's quite an important thing to bring across and to set the scene of, okay, right, where do I waste my time? Because if you're thinking about those 2 hours a day, that's sort of $30-40 an hour, and you multiply that up over a week, and then never mind a month, and then a year, that adds up to thousands of dollars a year that you're potentially just wasting. Okay, so what do you need to do? Next step on, having identified where you are, what you want to change, what's not working. It's all about changing our current time habits. And if you think about it, we don't get taught any time skills at school. We probably pick them up from our parents, our peers, other people that we've been around through the course of our lives, whether it's in a positive or a negative way. And we just do what we do. So unless you understand those habits and recognise where you've potentially got bad habits, how are you going to replace them with good habits? The classic probably is people, and you get people that are constantly late for everything. It's just the way they work, it's the way they think, but it's a bad habit they've got into. Or people, in a similar sort of thread, people that only get a piece of work done if there's a deadline looming. And deadlines are such a powerful thing. It's amazing how you can put something off for months and months and months, and then as soon as you've got a deadline and it's 2 days to go, suddenly you find the time to get it done.
Yes. But unfortunately, it's usually at a lower quality than if you had to stress it out.
It is. I mean, some people have this idea that they do their best work when they're going to a deadline. It's like, well, yeah, okay. But there are much more effective and productive ways of working with the same impetus and the same motivation, which produces a better result. And it's understanding what's going on with that, where that's coming from. And it might just be that they are disorganised or overworked or overloaded. The other good or important thing to notice with time management or changing your time habits is to do it in small steps. It's like with everything. If you want to lose weight, you don't lose a stone a week. You do it really gradually. If you want to get fit, you don't start out by running a marathon. It's the same if you're going to change any of your habits and particularly improve your time management skills, is start out small, simple steps, and step by step. Once you've got one wrapped up and sorted out, then you can move on to the next one. And one thing that I always say with people, because everyone is different, is there isn't a one-size-fits-all methodology that's out there. There are a number of different methods. There are a number of different people that have different ideas and ways to work. And not everything will be right for everybody. David Allen is one that springs to mind. Stephen Covey is another one that I've used, and then there's Tim Ferriss and his 4-hour work week. They've all got great ways of doing things, but some people it'll work for, some it won't. So you need to find what works for you and apply that to your life and your work, and take the bits that fit, take the bits that work for you. I find that a lot of creative types often really struggle with the David Allen approach, which is very prescriptive, very structured, very much a routine, because that's not the way their minds tend to work. So, and what I want to go...
Sorry.
Go
on.
I was just going to say, what I wanted to go through was just 3 key strategies. As I said, we can't cover an awful lot, but just 3 key things that people can take away. So, first one, and if this is all you take away from this session, this is the one to go with, and it's about planning. Really simple, sounds obvious, and it is, but it's the one thing that so many people forget to do, and then they wonder why they don't achieve the things that they want to do. You need to start out with a plan, whether it's your goals, your objectives, or your business plan. If you don't have that, how do you know where you're going? We don't set out in our car to drive somewhere without knowing where we want to end up. And it's the same with anything like this. Have your destination or your objective in mind. And that will really help you to focus. Because once you know what it is that you're aiming for, then you can start putting the right strategies and the right actions in place to make it happen. And part of setting goals and objectives is you have your SMART goals. And if people are familiar with the SMART acronym, it's about making your goals very specific. So, yeah, losing weight is great, but how much weight do you actually want to use? Having a great career or running a good business, how much income do you want to earn? Making it measurable. So if you've been specific, how are you going to measure what it is that you hope to achieve? So putting measurements in place as well. Something that's achievable and realistic. So it's something that you know you can do, or, as I mentioned before, the small steps or stepping stones to get to a point. And again, making it timely. That's something a lot of people forget, the time element of putting a timeline along it, or by a date that you actually want to achieve something or get something done. Because again, that gives you the motivation and the focus to actually start working towards it. The other thing to do with planning is to do it daily. So at the beginning of every day or at the end of the previous day, sit down and plan what it is that you want to achieve today. What is it that you need to do this week? And plan it out and put it in your diary, your calendar, your scheduler, whatever you use. But try and have one of those, just one diary, so you don't have a personal one and a work one and a team one and the children's one and things all over the place, because that's where things will get forgotten. Unless you have a very good system of checking in with whichever one you're using, and sometimes people might want to have a sort of a home one which has got the kids' activities and where they need to be, school things up on there, and then they have their business one, but make sure those two things are in sync. So the number of times, and obviously that's something I get quite a lot, is people forget to write things down. The number of times I get a call saying, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be late for a meeting because I hadn't realised I'd got this on, or this has come up and I'd forgotten, didn't realise it wasn't in the diary. Put everything in the diary.
What advice would you give to people who might, say, overplan or are over-hopeful of how much they can appreciate or get done in a day?
We'll come on to that bit. that comes on under the sort of prioritising, because, that totally agree, Daryl. That is a classic. People start out with I'm going to achieve the world by the end of the week, and then wonder why they haven't. But again, planning is the first point, is decide what you want to do, and then you focus on what's important. The other thing I see with a lot of people is we're trying to do too much, and in sort of today's society and everything there is that's going on, and everyone wants to sort of be connected and do lots of things. There's lots of expectation, and we actually take on more and more and more. But sometimes what we need to do is refocus, rebalance, and actually do less. The last point on this is about chunking, and that's when you're looking at your diary, and if you're in a sort of work environment, you have emails to do, you have phone calls to make, you might have meetings, you might have reports to write, all the different types of tasks. Try and chunk them together and set aside time in your diary to do that, in your scheduler. Your scheduler diary shouldn't just be for meetings and appointments. Block out time when you're going to do your email, when are you going to make your phone calls. And rather than making phone calls sort of here, there and everywhere throughout the day, and the same with emails, set aside chunks of time when you work on them. And that helps with the distraction and the interruption aspect of not being very efficient. So if you're working on one thing, your mind's you're in that right sort of frame of mind, you can get a lot more done.
What advice would you have for, say, a manager whose role seems to centre around distractions, where the staff are coming into their office on a regular basis with semi-critical or perceived crises?
My key, and I've got it down a bit later on, is the say no. Office door policy can be quite a good thing, and it depends on the environment sometimes, but quite a lot of managers and directors, one of the first things I say to them is, if they're in an office, is have an open, closed door system. So if the door's closed, I don't want to be interrupted. I'm getting on with something, or they might be in a meeting or on a phone call. And if it's open, it's come in and interrupt me.
Mm.
Something else that can work quite well with that is to have meetings, scheduled meetings with your staff at suitable points throughout the week or even the day, when they can come in with those questions that they need answers to or clarification, whatever it might be, rather than those constant interruptions throughout the day as and when they think of something. It helps them be more organised, and it also helps the manager not to get distracted.
And secondly, just on that, when you've got staff who are looking at, say, a receptionist role where they're handling, of course, calls randomly from the public, many times our post is handed administration tasks or marketing or even payroll related issues in many companies, and there's a feeling that person feels that they get too many distractions to do their job properly. When I talk to people who apply for those types of jobs or have come from those jobs, what would you say to that particular person?
So they're the person that's at the end of the food chain.
Yeah.
And they get everything dumped on them.
Or at the start of the food chain, yes.
Yeah. It's for that it's about clarifying roles and responsibilities, and that sort of relates to the plan, the objectives. What are the objectives, the key responsibilities for this role? Am I the person that is expected to? And yes, I can see that they do tend to be the person, again, because everyone else is so busy, they think, oh, who can I get to do this? And it gets dumped on the sort of poor admin person, receptionist person, is being very clear about what they can and can't do and how much time they've got to do things, and is that really part of their role and their responsibility? So it's clarifying things. And again, it's something that I mention in a bit. It's about boundaries. It's about saying no. And it might be that if they're really too busy to do what they're expected to do, then that's where you need to sort of push back and say, well, look, you're constantly giving me this to do and asking me to do this, which means I'm not able to do what's being expected of me.
There's a classic role out there. It's called the all-rounder in the marketplace, where the person is expected to do everything, or random things that are researching on the internet, for marketing projects to fixing the printer or cleaning up the reception or whatever. So that type of role could be it doesn't have a real defined job description. It's very loose.
And I'm guessing that the smaller the business, the more likely that you end up with that what we call jack of all trades option, which as a business owner, if it's your own business, that's what you tend to be, because you're doing absolutely everything. So if you've just got a few people, then you're again spreading the load of what needs to be done. And then as the organisation gets larger, then you get people. You have a technical person who will come and fix the printer. You'll have a cleaner who comes in to clean, and it's all those, again, understanding the hourly rate aspect is who's the best person for that job. Is it this all-rounder role? And some people might be more than happy to do that because they like the variety, but it's understanding, is there enough time in their day for them to be able to do all of these things they're being expected to do?
Very good.
So the next important strategy is prioritise. And here we go with the to-do lists. Those, I'm going to rule the world by the end of the day. I've got 20 things on my list, and I'm going to get those all done. And you need to be, and I like referring to these as action lists rather than to-do lists. To-do lists do tend to be those sheets of A4 paper that people write up and keep adding to, and it's a great big long list. And very rarely do things get scratched off. But it's picking the handful of things, and I really do mean a handful of things, that you are going to do today. And you're actually going to be able to do today. And again, being very specific about what those things are. So sort of write a report could be anything from a 5-minute job to a 5-day job. So being much more specific about what the actual action is that you're going to do complete today, and being realistic, which is the more important thing, about how much you can actually achieve I would always say never put more than 10 things on your to-do list on a day.
10 things. Okay.
Yeah. The reality, I mean, there's what I call the day-to-day work, which will just get done. So you don't itemize absolutely everything that you're going to do in a day, because that's what your job is, and you tend to know what you need to do, and you just get on with it. But the more the specific things that you need to make sure that you've achieved might be part of that. But if you sort of think about the time that's available, you've planned out your time, you schedule in the different chunks of time when you're going to do different tasks, so that by having an action list, you can get to the end of the day and you've ticked off everything you need to do. The reality might be that if you have a list of 10 things, you actually only get 5 or 6 of those done. If that's the case, the following day, you only have 5 or 6 things on your list. And if you get all of those done, then, okay, 5 or 6 is the optimum that you can work with on any given day, because you get distracted, you get interrupted, something comes up, you have to sort of go off and do something different. And it might actually be you need to have one important thing that you're going to get done today, and maybe even have one thing on your list.
And how much energy that would give you, just ticking it off and knowing that you've actually completed something.
Yeah, exactly.
Having half a dozen half-dones on your desk.
Yeah. And that's where the focus comes in. It's almost focus on one thing at a time. You can have a sort of a master list that's got sort of everything that you would like to get done, and then you pick from that to create your, right, this is what I'm going to do today. But if you know what your objectives are, if you have your goals, if you have your business plan, if you have your roles and responsibilities, you have a better idea of what you need to be doing on a day-to-day basis, and what are the specific activities that you need to do today or this week.
Very good.
And obviously related to that, when you look at this list of things, you can categorize them with different priorities, whether they're urgent or important. And there's Stephen Covey uses it. There's a sort of a window with sort of 4 quadrants in it of urgent versus important. And you really need to be working on what's important before it becomes urgent. So when your utility bill ends up on the doormat, that's fairly important, because if you don't pay it, you get cut off. So you want to pay that sooner rather than later, and not wait until the red one drops on the doormat and it's then become urgent because you're about to be cut off. So it's dealing with important things, which if you don't deal with them, they'll become urgent. And when you're working on urgent things, you tend to be working in crisis mode, or you're being very reactive, which I see quite a lot of people are just so busy. They get into work, they sit down, they're just dealing with whatever comes in, whoever's asking. They're just constantly reacting. And you're not working on things that are really important and are going to make a difference, and you're not doing quality work when you're in that sort of phase. And you're potentially, when you're working on things that are actually not urgent and unimportant, that's when we get sort of sidetracked with the trivia, or we're doing things that aren't really our responsibility, and that's where you end up wasting a lot of time dealing and managing those distractions and interruptions that come in, whether it's over the phone, whether it's via the computer, email, or your colleagues. Are they really important? What is their sort of priority on a list of 1 to 3 or ABC? So it can be very useful to have a look at your list of actions and think, okay, what's the priority 1 task today? And at least make sure that you get that done. And as Brian Tracy says in his book, Eat That Frog, is do the number 1 most important, or the task actually you least want to do, but it is important at the beginning of the day. So once you've got that done, the rest of the day hopefully goes a lot smoother and a lot more easily, because you've got that big important thing out of the way.
Which is not have a coffee, I suppose.
No. Well, part of your routine might be, and you need to sort of set up and have a structure and routine to your day. So sort of setting your day up might be have a coffee, but so you then sit down, but have a coffee and plan it was something else I did with somebody I was working with. That was his trigger point, is when he was sitting down with his coffee first thing in the day, he was then spending the 5-10 minutes planning out what he was going to do that day. And then once he finished his coffee, ready to get going. It takes a bit longer than 5-10 minutes to drink a coffee, but yeah. And also knowing that what time do you want to start work and what time do you want to finish, you can weave that in and create more of a structure and routine. And it means you start taking control of your time rather than other people controlling it. And that's when you can feel overwhelmed or you can feel stressed, when you're not actually in control anymore.
Very good.
Okay, so a third strategy is really about working smarter and being more organised. And I think that the key thing with this is those first 2 points, is setting clear boundaries around your time. It's your time, it's your choice and your decision as to what you do with it and how you spend it. In most situations, your boss might tell you differently. So be very clear about, and I was sort of saying back to the point at the beginning about if you're working very long hours, decide what your working hours are going to be. I mean, in a sort of work-employee situation, you have contracted hours. You may or may not work to those. You might have flexible working, which I know is becoming much more, people are doing a lot more of that, working flexibly around core hours or even working from home these days. So be very clear about what your boundaries are, whether it's with work, whether it's the type of work, and that's where understanding of what your objectives are, your roles and responsibilities. So if somebody is asking you to do something that is outside of the boundaries that you've set yourself, then you can sort of say no, which is the next really important key word to learn if you want really good time habits, is to be able to say no.
Very true.
Because I find with a lot of people that have very long to-do lists or are very happy to help, the office all-rounder you were talking about is potentially the person that is going to say yes to everything every time they get asked to do something. But actually being able to say no is much more powerful, because going back to the point of valuing your time, it really helps you value your time to know that actually I don't have time for that. And also the other person realises that you value your time and you'll say no. And you can say no in a nice way. You can sort of say, if somebody is asking you to do something, no, I can't do that right now, or can you come and talk to me tomorrow because you might be in the middle of something, particularly useful when you're being distracted, or perhaps point them in the direction of somebody else. So you can still be helpful by saying no, but you're protecting your time and you're protecting your boundaries.
I guess managers can do that too, but also small business owners who haven't got the resources to save the world completely, having a way to say no, that I'm overwhelmed or at the moment, or it's not the work I want to take on.
Yeah. And that's a very good point. And again, something that I see, particularly new small businesses when they start up, they just want to do every piece of work that's coming in. But what you quickly realise is that there are some pieces of work, shall we say, better quality than others, and some of the clients might be a better fit for the business. So being very clear, and if you have a very structured business plan or you know what your objectives are, being very clear to say, is this a good fit or not? And actually I can say no. Sometimes it can be a bit sort of scary in that situation to let things go, but actually wait for the right opportunity or for the better opportunity to come along, rather than finding actually you've just taken on so much that when that great opportunity does turn up, you've got all these little things that you just sort of said yes to because you felt you ought to. Yeah.
I can imagine that for a lot of salespeople who are out there who are looking at opportunities coming in the door to actually latch on to an opportunity because they've got nothing else at the time. Might be they've latched on to an opportunity that's really a time drain that is giving them low benefits, but makes them feel like they're producing.
Yeah. I find that with that sort of side of things, or people that are sort of in businesses, is taking on work that, again, is potentially not giving them the income, so they're not valuing their time and the hourly rate and what they do, which then ends up being a nightmare client. And sometimes you have to, say, sack those nightmare clients or even the nightmare employees because they're overstepping those boundaries that you've set. So, reducing distractions and managing the interruptions, how do we go about doing those? I've probably touched on a few pointers for that so far. But distractions, as I said, distractions will come from email in particular these days. Is a massive distraction for an awful lot of people. Phone calls, technology, combination of both of those in that we're now connected 24/7. If you allow yourself to be, and if you don't have clear boundaries, because that's somewhere a way you can set your boundaries around the technology, is you switch your mobile phone off at certain times. You don't answer it outside of working hours if it's your work phone. Things like that is where you can set boundaries that are going to stop those interruptions when you don't want them. And people is the other main one. So first point, email, reducing it as a distraction. I'm guessing a lot of people have 100 to 200, something I was reading yesterday saying with technology these days people are getting, it's easy enough to get over 1,000 emails a day coming in. It's how you manage and deal with that. And if anyone has got message alerts coming up for their email, again, number one point, switch those off. That's a huge distraction every time it pings up or something flashes to say, oh, new message has come up. Mentally, you've just focused on something else that you weren't working on, and then you have to decide, well, am I going to go and have a look at it? And if you do go and have a look at it, is it really important? Is it more important than what you were working on? Thinking about priorities. Do you need to deal with it there and then? And if you do, if you're in the habit of, oh, emails come in, yeah, go and have a look at it, deal with it, go back to what you were working on, you're instantly distracting yourself as much as the email has just distracted you.
What are your thoughts about Skype in the workplace, or something, a real-time messenger between remote workers?
It can be a complete nightmare. Again, I've had, there was an organisation I was talking to where they were using instant messenger or a form of, and people were constantly popping up, and sometimes it could be really inane questions, sometimes it might be quite interesting, but that's a massive distraction and interruption throughout the day. So if you think about, well, okay, what are my boundaries around this? Am I in the middle of doing something really important, in which case can I switch it off for an hour or 2 hours? And with Skype, I don't get interrupted quite so much as I used to on that. I use Skype quite a lot myself for calls, particularly overseas calls. So I tend to only switch it on when I know I'm going to go on a call, but you can take yourself offline. You also have to remember to do these things and to remember to switch yourself back on again. But that's something that you can do with the phone, with instant messenger, with things like Skype, is switch it off when you don't absolutely need to be using it, or you need to be contactable, or you need some quiet time, or maybe even remove yourself from your desk and go and sit in a different area, whether it's a meeting room, a coffee shop, local hotel, somewhere that's a different space, and get away from the normal distractions. There was an organisation, I think they were a French company, that they banned email, but they then introduced instant messenger instead. And I thought, okay, banning email, because an awful lot of people use email when actually a conversation would do, and the number of companies I've sort of seen and heard of where one person will send an email to a person sitting sort of 2 desks down from them. So, well, why not go and have a face-to-face conversation? And then you end up with the email ping-pong happening as well, so emails are bouncing back and forth as people ask a question and answer it, ask another question, and much more efficient just to pick up the phone.
Especially if it's a critical question that needs to be asked. If it's not so critical, then perhaps an email might be more appropriate to sit in the box.
Yeah, and email. I mean, emails and phone calls are means of communication, and you need to be picking the most appropriate means and using it in the best way. I mean, email is a whole other topic, and there's pages I could go into on things to do and not do. But the important thing from the distraction perspective is switching off those email alerts, and as I said in the sort of the planning section about chunking, setting aside time to deal with and do your email and not doing it sporadically throughout the day as and when, which a lot of people will be doing.
Very good. Well, we're almost out of time, Clare. It's been quite stimulating.
Okay, coming on to the last summary slide anyway, so that's good.
Good time management.
So, yeah, I mean, as I said, there's an awful lot that I could go through, and there's more detail I can go on to each thing, really. But the key things for people to take away is set your objectives and stay focused. Do that planning. That is really going to make, the number of times people have come to me and said, oh, yeah, well, I really notice when I plan my day, things go so much better. But you do need to be flexible about your planning. Prioritising and organising your work so that you're working smarter. Really important to set those boundaries and expectations of yourself and other people. And spending time, thinking about what distracts and interrupts you, and then taking steps to reduce it. And then you will create your new time habits from that. And the really important thing is think about it and then actually do something, so act on it.
Very good. I've got a question for you that was posed to me about 2 weeks ago from one of the attendees in one of our leadership courses. And she was going through a fair bit of grief from a family loss. And she was finding that at work she was really scattered with her time management. And she was looking for ways to help centre herself, if you like, to get things done. Just her brain would wander, and she'd felt that it was not as effective as she could be.
And that, I think that there's a couple of things that can come in there. Obviously, she's under a lot of stress, and sort of life changes like that, life challenges, do have a big impact on us. But you can, if you take that step back and refocus and think about the balance of thinking, right, what's really important here? What do I need for myself if you were in that situation? It might be taking time out. It might be talking to your employer, if she was employed or self-employed, I don't know. Is actually have that conversation and communicate and sort of say, look, I'm finding it quite tough here, and perhaps even reduce working hours for a period of time until she can sort of deal with that, because that's a fairly major thing to deal with, going through a sort of family loss and illnesses, and there are all sorts of aspects. But think about what's best for you and what you need. Sometimes people like to sort of throw themselves into work because it takes their mind off of things. But if you find that you're internally getting distracted, switch off every now and then, go and do something different, take a break, focus on, planning can actually help with that, is giving you a bit of focus, right, this is what I'm going to achieve, even if it's minimal, I'm going to do this by the end of the day, even if it's something really simple.
So what you seem like you're phrasing it is that grief can be a form of distraction in itself, as in it's interrupting your thoughts and taking you off a post.
Yeah, and it's natural, it's going to happen. You need to acknowledge that. It might be that, and I think with something like that, you need to allow it to come out. I mean, any sort of big emotional upheavals and changes like that, it's going to happen. So rather than necessarily trying to sort of suppress it, take a bit of time out if it's needed, just to go through that grieving process. Sometimes with things like grief, it doesn't happen because you can get so caught up in what's going on at the time, it doesn't come out for a few months or sometimes even years later. But acknowledge it, deal with it, think about the balance, what's important to you, health and emotions, relationships, the other relationships that are around you, what do you need, and put a plan in place to help take you forward.
Very good. I know listening out there, there'd be managers who are worried about if you like, not having someone beside them they can delegate things randomly to them, if you like. And there are, of course, the micromanagement style where people like to hover around desks to ensure things are being done, and that can also be a distraction as well. I guess what would you say to people like that who need that ability to delegate randomly, if they like, throughout the day?
Having the right people to delegate to is really important. And I mean, I've dealt with both types of those sorts of people. So whether it's the sort of the business owner that needs to delegate certain tasks out to somebody else, and also the manager that needs to delegate to their staff, is understanding what makes good and effective delegation and what ends up being poor delegation. So you either micromanage or there isn't enough control in place. And with delegation, and it applies to outsourcing equally, it's about the sort of who, what, where, when and how. So who's going to do it? What is it specifically that they need to do? So is the person that you're delegating to, do they understand what's required from them? And from a leadership and manager point of view, knowing whether your staff have got the skills and the capabilities to do that piece of work. Some people you can just say, go and organise that meeting, and off they go and it's all done, and the others you may need to be a bit more specific about what's required, who's needed, etc. Who, what, where might apply, where something is needed, how a task is expected to be done. There might be procedures, you might have an idea. It doesn't mean your idea is always the best idea. And when it's needed by, that's the other important thing, is the when. Which again, can you do this for me? And by the way, I need it by the end of the day or the end of the week. Putting some timings on tasks that are being delegated as well. And then keeping track. So knowing what you delegated out, when it's going to come back by, who's doing it, and then checking in with them if need be, going through the process without micromanaging and, as you say, leaning over their shoulder and checking every 5 minutes.
Very good. Well, thank you, Clare. You've been very generous with your time and what you've shared with us as well. I've certainly learned quite a fair bit too.
Good. Well, I hope that your listeners will have found that useful, and if they want to get in touch with me, then feel free to do so. And for anybody that wants to check how their time habits are going, there's a free time audit on my website. Just take a look at that.
I'm looking at that at the moment. So clareevans.co.uk. It's with the on the left-hand side. And you've also got a lot of other content that's quite handy on tips for time management to see instant results to see on the front page as well. A good article and newsletter area as well.
Yeah, they're my top tips, which I've touched on some of those in this session. But yeah, there's a monthly newsletter I produce, and there's always articles that are coming out on that. And you can always email or contact me if you've got any specific questions or challenges. And so I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me through that. So I just want to help people have a much more focused and balanced and enjoyable life, whether it's their working career or whether they're running their own business. There's only so much time we have, and we need to be spending it wisely.
Isn't that the truth? Well, Clare, I think it's a good point to end up our session today. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can get you back in the future to represent content again.
That's great. Thank you for the invite, Darryl, and I hope everyone's found it useful.